Good morning and welcome to our first session, which is with Kelly Critcher, who's a clinical nurse specialist in London, and also the author of the book, A Matter of Life and Death, Courage, Compassion and the Fight Against Coronavirus. Good morning, Kelly. Great to have you with us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Steve. Good morning.
Fantastic. So we've got about half an hour to have a discussion. So audience, basically, don't forget, this is your opportunity to ask Kelly any questions you might have, so about her career and her achievements, or anything you really want to know about writing a book and being an author and all that sort of thing. So please send in your questions via Swapcard, which is the platform we're using today, and I will ask them on your behalf. And just to point out, they don't actually have to be questions; they can be comments or statements as well. So anything you want to say, really. So we'll get going. So I've got some questions for you, Kelly. So nothing too scary, hopefully. But so I'll kick off. So obviously the title of your book gives a bit of a clue as to what it's about. But yeah, can you give us a summary, perhaps, on what it is about?
Yeah, so a lot of people have described my book as a book of two halves, and I think that's probably a really accurate way of describing it. The idea of the book came long before any of us knew about coronavirus. I've always been really fascinated by the interactions we have with patients and families on a daily basis, and when I moved from acute nursing into palliative care, it just became more interesting. It became a real privilege to be a part of those experiences, and I started to feel like if those experiences aren't captured, will I look back when I've retired from my nursing and think, wow, I wish I'd been more proactive and written stories down. So the idea behind the book was to share the experiences, the feelings, the stories of patient interactions, what it's like being a nurse, which was hugely important. I don't think enough of us share our stories, and I think I really wanted people to know what it's like in the world of nursing, what it's like especially in the world of palliative care nursing. And then, of course, when coronavirus came along, it brought a whole new aspect to the book, and I was able to keep a diary all throughout COVID of how it was at Northwick Park Hospital where I work, what was happening in the country as a whole in healthcare, and to bring into that other people's voices. So people that I work with, people in ITU, people in HDU, so bringing together different stories of their experiences, and that's really essentially what the book is.
Great, fantastic. That actually answered two of my questions in one, which was how did you come about the idea of writing it? So fantastic. I suppose a question that immediately sort of springs to mind is has it got a target audience that you wrote it in mind for? Is it other nurses, or is it anyone with an interest in palliative care, or just anyone who likes a good book?
I think probably covering all of those. I mean, myself, I love to read, and I do like to read fiction, but I love to read. I love to read non-fiction, and I like to hear about people's lives, what they've been through, and how that's shaped the way they think about the world. So I wanted to write my story and how that's shaped how I am as a person. So I guess the sort of general public, but in particular, I wanted to open up people's eyes a little bit to palliative care. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what palliative care is. Lots of people tend to think that palliative care is just about dying, but to me, palliative care is really about living well until you die. I wanted to help people understand that although the process of living with a terminal illness is obviously very overwhelming and terrifying, there are ways to make things better, and there are ways that we can support people and their families to live well. So I kind of wanted it to be a bit about this is the reality of it. Yes, it can be very emotional and distressing at times, but actually this is life and this is real, and we're all going to die at some stage. So why not talk about it? Why not open it up a little bit and make people less afraid of what's out there?
Oh, great, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, obviously at Nursing Times, we talk and write about a lot of sort of nursing roles and things, but those people who work in palliative care and hospices, particularly, they always seem to be a very positive environment, actually.
Mhm.
Perhaps different to what the general public might think, actually. But I don't know whether that chimes
Yeah,
with what you would
yeah,
think. Mm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think people often say to us, like, how do you do your job? It must be so depressing. But to flip that entirely, because it's actually very inspiring working in palliative care. And I know, I say this a lot, it is genuinely a privilege to be a part of somebody's life at that time. So you can make a difference, and to be able to make a difference is what I went into nursing for. So to be able to feel like I'm doing that every day makes me a very positive person.
Fantastic. Right. Okay. So let's get back, I suppose, to the book and how that came about. So can you talk us perhaps through the process? I mean, you obviously mentioned that you kept diaries, which I mean, I write a diary, so that's always very useful because I've got
Mm.
a brain like a sieve, but it does mean that you can remember what's going on. Yeah, did you just write down and sit down and write the book in a fairly short period, or did you do a bit each day? What was your process?
Yeah, so I started writing down stories, and it's very different. Like when you've experienced something, you think, "Well, I'm going to write about that," and then when you sit down and write, it never quite feels the same. It's very difficult to get that emotion and that feeling down on paper from what you had in the actual situation. So I started writing quite a long time, quite a few years ago, and I'd come home when a particular situation or experience had moved me, or been quite interesting or whatever, and I would write that down, and I would write how I was thinking and how I was feeling and what had happened. But I felt like, and then I started thinking, this could be a book, but actually I need some help with how to write things in a way that people will want to read them. So I then started researching how to write a book and what you can do, and I approached a guy who's actually an ex-journalist and now a writer, and I approached him and I said, do you think there's anything here? Do you think I could do a book? And he said, well, send me some stories. So we started sending, emailing each other, and I'd write some stories down or send him some samples of things that I'd done already. And yeah, he said this could definitely be something. And we thought about the fact that actually there are starting to be quite a few books out there. So you've got, the Adam Kay, This Is Going to Hurt, and you've got Rachel Clark, who's a wonderful palliative care consultant and has just done her second or maybe third book. But there's very little out there by nurses. There's a few, but not many. So I felt like we had a stronger case for a book, and he agreed. He said, let's hear this from a nursing perspective. And he approached a publisher on my behalf, and we got the publisher interested. And again, they then said, right, send us some stories, some samples of your work. So I worked with Tom, the writer. He helped me to format things in a way that would be readable and that they would want to buy into. And they did. They said, yep, okay, let's work with this. And then this was probably sort of early 2020 in sort of January or late 2019. And then obviously COVID came along, and the publishers were just said, get her to sign the contract, basically. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, that was the last finishing touch. But and then obviously kept the diaries all throughout COVID. So when we actually wrote the
So
book, sorry, go on.
no, go ahead, carry on. Interrupted your flow.
Yeah, so so I'd obviously been writing the stories and diaries for quite a number of years, but the actual process of the writing the book became a fairly quick process, because I started, after the first wave of COVID, sort of the end of the summer. We were then given a deadline of October to get the book to them. So that was obviously quite a lot of pressure. And people said, "Oh, how did you do it? You're working full time, you've got a family." Well, actually, all of us had to give up many things during COVID. We, in lockdown, all of the things that I'd normally do outside of work, playing netball and all those things aren't there. So you do have more time, and it's just finding a couple of hours here and there. I took a week off and just tried to write every day. That it was an exhausting process, and I have an absolute newfound respect for authors, anyone who writes, because the process of getting things to the point where you feel happy with it as the person writing is absolutely, it's so draining, because I am a bit of a perfectionist, and I would read things and I think I just don't like it, or want to start again, like scrap that, and no, it's just we're not getting anywhere, and we'd go backwards and forwards, and I'd send something to Tom and he'd send it back, and yeah, it was exhausting. But you kind of get there, and you start to get there, and then you're reading chapter after chapter and you're thinking, yeah, actually I'm really happy with this. So yeah, it was a sort of condensed process in the end, but and exhausting, but well worth it.
No, fantastic. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. You obviously you started it before the pandemic, so you'd obviously got the period. Yeah, the period was a sort of it wasn't a neat kind of I'm writing a book. It was a over an extended period. It's very interesting. Now, I was going to ask you about how you fitted it into your day job, and obviously the fact that writing is tiring mentally. But yes, as you say, I guess we've all had a bit more time for without being able to go out and do our normal stuff. So I suppose, I mean, did you ever get writer's block or anything like that?
Yeah, and I'm sure you can share in this, Steve, because you allocate yourself time and you think, right, I've got this week off now. It's great, I'm going to get loads done, and then you wake up on the first morning and you just don't feel like it. You think, actually, I've got a week off, I'm exhausted from working, my brain has switched off, what do I do? And it was giving yourself permission to say, okay, if I don't feel like it now, go away and do something different, go for a walk, have a sleep, whatever it is, and allow yourself to wait until you do really feel that drive to get things done. And for me, when I do feel like that, I'm quite productive, so I can get a lot done in a short space of time. So I think I allowed myself that writer's block, that time when you just don't feel like it, or if you can't think of how to make things better, just put it away, put it to one side, go and do something completely different, and then come back to it. And sometimes it might mean staying up till 1 or 2 in the morning because you get on a roll, and then that's it, and you don't want that to stop, and you need to make the most of it. So sometimes it was just waiting till the right time and then going with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that. Writing at the right time is far more productive than trying to force yourself. Don't always have that luxury, but yeah, totally relate to that. So have you been publicising the book at all? I mean, I guess sort of traditional book signings haven't been happening and things like that, but have you obviously you've been able to talk about the book and do events like this?
Yeah, it was quite good. So I did a Sky News little interview on the morning of the book, when the book was published. So it was published on the 29th of April. So I had a little thing on Sky News that morning, except they got my name wrong, but that was fine. and then on the day after, which was the Thursday, I went on Woman's Hour on Radio 4. So that was fantastic. That was a really good experience. Quite terrifying, but really good. And on the evening of the launch, our local bookshop, so Chorleywood Bookshop, did an online event, which they'd been doing throughout COVID for new authors that have been published, and that was really fantastic. One of the Macmillan psycho-oncologists who works within our wider team, she read the book and then kind of interviewed me for the online event. So it was a really good event, and we had quite a good turnout for that. And then it's just little things from then. So different people have approached me from different radio stations and different publications. Obviously Nursing Times did a piece, and before the book was published. So yeah, it's just little bits and pieces.
Well, yeah, complete pro. This is today must be a walk in the park for you. So yeah.
Oh.
Um, so I mean, we were obviously having a chat before we went live. You told me you've done speeches as well to school children, which must be a challenge. Quite a tough audience,
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yes, that I said that was absolutely terrifying. Trying to pre-record a speech, but not only that, and it going back to being a bit of a perfectionist. I wanted it to be a great speech, and I wanted people to feel inspired by it. You know, nursing has had its difficult times and still has its difficult times. It's not a well-paid profession. It's not a profession that people um, you know, choose to go into if they're after the sort of money. But it is a great profession, and if I even inspired one person who listened to that to take up nursing, then I feel like I've done a good job, because we need people. We need nursing needs great people to come and join, and I love being a nurse. I never forget when I was doing when I was a student nurse, I was working in a pub just to earn extra money, and this lady who was a little bit older said to me when she found out I was doing my nursing, she said, "Oh, what are you doing that for?" She said, "I'm a nurse and I can't wait to get out." And rather than put me off, it actually inspired me, because I thought in my head, I thought, well, good. Do you know what? Leave, because nursing does not need people like you. Nursing needs people that are passionate and motivated to give great care and to make a difference. And if you've lost that, or you've never had it, or you don't feel like you've got it, then it probably isn't the right career for you.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, wise words. So yeah, just thinking about your own career. Obviously, that talking about how you decided to come into nursing. But could you give us a little bit of background on your career from that point to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So it's quite interesting, because my mum was a nurse and her mum was a nurse. But when I was growing up, it was absolutely the last thing I was going to do. My mum could obviously see that I had potential in me, but I think the more she pushed it, the more I backed away. I had one experience of being in hospital, and I hated the smell of hospitals, and I just thought, absolutely no. I went to university and did a business management course in Cheltenham, and I came out with a 2-1 with honours in business management, but no idea what I wanted to do. I went travelling, and then I have no idea why or what caused this, but one day I just knew. I just thought, I want to be a nurse. And I think maybe having that pressure taken away from me from that year to decide what I wanted to do just allowed me a bit of headspace. And I've literally never looked back. I got my mum to send me out before the days of emailing forms over. I got my mum to send me out the forms to fill in and send back home. And then as soon as I came back after my year, I started my nursing. Did my 3 years in what used to be Thames Valley University. It's now the University of West London. Loved it from the first day on my first placement. Thought it was fantastic. Knew I was in the right place. On qualification, I worked on an acute medical ward at Northwick Park, and loved it. It was like I was a sponge. Just there was so much to learn every single day. There was different things happening. I thought acute nursing was fascinating. Learned so much, but then kind of got a bit dragged down with the lack of staffing, poor staffing, feeling that overwhelming responsibility for your PIN number when you're going onto a shift, because you've got really dependent patients and not enough nursing staff to look after them, and also started to feel like it was a bit of a conveyor belt of patients coming through. It felt a bit like it was time to move on. Got involved with trying to roll out the Liverpool Care Pathway. So back then, that's what they used for when people were identified as dying. Obviously, that was taken out, and most places have replaced it with a better care plan. So worked with a palliative care team, really enjoyed working with them, started to see patients with them when they came onto the ward, and felt like they just offered something extra. The way that they spoke to patients and families, involving them in the decisions that were being made, not just prescribing care to them, was fantastic. I then started doing some bank shifts at the local hospice, and similar to my first day on my first nursing placement, I loved it from the minute I walked in there. It was a whole different type of nursing, and I was learning all over again. I loved it. So as soon as a job opportunity came up there, it was actually with the Hospice at Home team, I went for it, and had a great sort of 5 years working with the local hospice in different roles, working with fantastic nurses who taught me the importance of real good basic care in nursing. So things like when you're giving a patient a wash, it isn't just a wash. You're learning about their skin, you're learning where their pain is, you're building trust, you're you're conversing with them and finding out about them, and they've invited you into their home, so there's that aspect too. And I just really learned so much. It was great. Got to the point where I kind of felt like I was needing to progress a bit in my career, and in hospices there tends to not be as much opportunity because they're smaller. It's not that same opportunity as in a big trust. And so then after about 5 years there, an opportunity came up to be a palliative care nurse specialist within London North West, and I applied, and that was back in early 2015, and yeah, I've been there ever since.
Oh, brilliant. So I suppose the obvious next question is, what next? Have you got any ambitions? Do they lie in nursing or do they lie in writing?
Well, I think I'd definitely I'm going to stay in nursing, but I can probably combine the two. So maybe starting to think about, so I've started to look at some leadership courses, so maybe looking at taking on a Band 8 role within a palliative care team. Maybe thinking about some lecturing. I don't know whether, and then that's on the sort of same line as the teaching and helping to inspire people in the same way that writing does. So maybe that might be next. Who knows?
Any more books in the offing?
Not right now. As I said, it was hugely a hugely exhausting process, and I think to write a really good book relies on having the creativity to think of another story that people will be interested to read. And I don't know whether I have that in me. Whether I could do something more related to aimed at the profession of nursing. So maybe thinking about writing a book aimed at nurses or other healthcare professionals, that could be something. And I think with me, I'd never say never.
That's good to hear. I suppose talking about the book still. What's the response been like? Sort of, for example, from colleagues and others that you've that the people you work with.
Yeah, so it's been so positive. As any healthcare professional, but I think especially in nursing, you're kind of always looking over your shoulder. You're always thinking, what are people going to think of me? Have I done that right? Is there going to be any implications? And so I think for probably the 2 months preceding publication date, I was terrified of people not liking it, people thinking bad of me. I was going over all of the chapters thinking, is that going to offend anyone? And I had to keep reminding myself that this is my story. This is what's happened to me, and this is my experiences. It's real. I'm sorry if anyone is upset by it, but you know what? The feedback I've had is just absolutely fantastic. From my immediate team, who are hugely supportive, which I'm always so grateful for, to the wider hospital, the communications team, other people within the hospital and the trust. It's been really, really moving, really, how positively people have taken it.
brilliant to hear. I suppose if there's anyone out there listening who thinks who might be a budding writer, what's your advice to them?
So start writing things down and rewriting them until you can read them in a way that you think other people would want to read. Keep a diary. Look what else is out there. Be inspired by other people. But if it's something that you feel you want to do, then just make that first move and approach somebody to see whether it's something that you might be able to work on. Because there's so many people out there who want to help authors or people who think they might want to write a book. There's so much help and support. So just make that first move and approach somebody to see whether it's something that you could take forward.
It sounds like, although it was obviously very stressful, it was almost slightly not therapeutic, I suppose that's probably the wrong word, but sort of quite an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have said the word cathartic. I think that's the real reflective, especially going through what we went through with coronavirus. Northwick Park was one of London Northwest, because it covers Ealing and other areas as well. But that area was so hard hit by COVID, especially the first time round, that to be able to keep that diary and to reflect every day on what was happening, for me it was so good. And I think yes, I did come through it and have my adrenaline hangover and have my time where I needed to take a few days away from work just to find my headspace again, and had a little bit of a downtime. But overall, I feel like keeping that diary and writing things down every day helped me in a big way. So I guess that's something else I would say to people. If you're going through a period where you feel like you're struggling emotionally, just sort of come home from work, your shift, write things down. If you're having a bad day, just write down how you're feeling. It really does help to put things in perspective for you. It helps you to reflect and to offload as well.
Yeah, no, I knew things were tough at Northwick Park, because we interviewed a group of nurses there for Nursing Times actually, and they explained the challenges. So we've got a couple of minutes left, basically. Just with all of that in mind, really, just sort of summing up, what's your message for anyone coming into nursing at the moment?
If you've got a passion for it, go for it. Be inspirational to others. Don't forget the importance of the really good basic nursing care. I think it's very difficult for nurses these days, especially nurses on the wards and district nurses. They get so bogged down by their targets, their paperwork. But just remember, investing a little bit of time in that basic care actually saves you time in the future, because you learn so much about your patient. Be passionate, make a difference, and absolutely go for it. Nursing is a great place to be.
Absolutely. And how do you get hold of your book? Is it available in all good retailers or Amazon or things like that?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's in WH Smith's. It's here and is. I think it's been in Asda stores. So yeah, have a look online. If you Google my name, it should come up.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Actually, just one more thing that actually just occurred to me while we were just talking there, just to say we've got about a minute left. Just going back to the colleagues and everything else. Did you have to get permission at all from people you were working with or anything like that to include them in the book, just as a practicality?
Yeah, that's the other thing about, especially in nursing, big confidentiality. Went through the comms team before I even signed the contract about the book. Anyone who's in the book, either so many details have been changed, they don't know who they are, or I've had direct permission. So even the patient stories, I've had direct permission if anyone's named, or if not, so many details have been changed. You capture the experience without the risk of giving away anything in terms of confidentiality.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Right, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much, Kelly. That was absolutely fantastic and fascinating to talk to you. So thank you very much for giving up your time this morning. So next we have a content
Thank you.
break. So please get
Thank you, Steve.
connecting with employers and arrange those video meetings to find out your secret codes for the prize draw. And we will be back at 11:15, so 11:15. Thank you very much.